Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Anthropology 499 Anthropological Writing. It's the 14th of April. It's Monday of week 14. Week 14. We are very quickly approaching the end of the semester. You can see we're here in week 14. Week 15, we're going to be polishing up these op-eds. And then week 16, we're going to be wrapping things up with your test. We're pretty much done for the semester. Just a couple things before we're going to continue our discussion of op-eds this week. Trying to get you towards a first draft. So we'll talk about structure today. On Wednesday, we're going to meet over in the GSSC. We're going to take a look at some op-eds over there and also print some out just in case they throw away the newspapers, which they did last time. Hopefully they're still over there. And we'll take a look at some op-eds and we'll do a little bit of structuring. We can look at both how they're structured in terms of content, what comes first, second, third, how they end, as well as what kind of topics are actually running in our local paper. So we'll do that. I also have a couple, if we get to it, either Wednesday or Friday, of anthropologists who I know who have written op-eds, and we can look at theirs and see kind of what they wrote. Okay. And also, hopefully today, if we have time, we're going to try to talk a little bit more, brainstorm about what topics we're going to pick because we are quickly approaching that first draft, which is going to be due on Friday. So let's take a look at, here's the week. I put links to the newspaper. This is the primary one we're going to try to submit to, the Eastern New Mexico News. It's a great way of like seeing what they actually run, seeing if your thing fits with the vibe. Also, the campus newsletter or the Chase, can check that out. We'll be submitting to them as well. I haven't heard back from them, but hopefully they get back to me. Also this week, you got your discussion board number 9 coming up, asking you about what current events are you going to write about for your op-ed? How is this current event both timely as well as important to discuss from an anthropological perspective? And then again, kind of going with what we're going to talk about on Wednesday, how we make this perspective understandable to the audience of Eastern New Mexico News. We're going to look at the paper and think about audience similar to the way we did it when we did the museum tour. I think it'll be easier this time because you've already had a practice thinking about different kinds of audiences. But think about your audience. What challenges might you face when presenting your ideas to your audience? And I guess I should put on this one more. And how will you overcome these obstacles? It's not enough to be like, yeah, these people are they're ignorant or they don't understand or they're, whatever. But how are you going to like bridge that gap if you're going to be challenging your audience? So we'll do that. Also this week, you got homework number 8 due, your rough drafts. So for homework number 8, it's similar to like we've been doing all semester. It's a rough draft of your 2 op-eds. They're 500 word each. That only makes 1,000 words. That's pretty good. State, local, regional, ENMU issues impacting your life. Remember, it's 1 state regional, 1 local or ENMU. So please turn in both your rough drafts in the same document. That way I can look at them and I can also push them back to, we'll do the same thing as before, where I will, we'll have a day in the writing center and we'll also have some time for us to peer review each other, which I think worked pretty well last time. So make sure you turn it in by Sunday at midnight. The link will close before class on Monday, and that'll allow me to send out things to the writing center because I need time to review it. So I try to send those by Sunday at midnight, so that way Monday morning they can come in and read it, and they're always like, is there any more? And I'm like, I don't know. Let me see. But if you don't, you won't get full credit. We'll talk about structure today, but make sure to use the ABCDEF structure we're going to talk about today. And this is the structure I'll be giving to the writing center. So when they're like, you don't have the F part of the structure, if you didn't read the document, you don't know what we're talking about, you're going to be mighty confused, right? So when you're doing this, I think it'll be useful for you to label the ABCDEF structure. Of course, you're not going to do this when you like turn in to the newspaper. They're going to be like, I don't care what section F is, but it will help you, your partners, and the writing center to kind of see that you got all the parts. So I think it's actually kind of best for you, the person actually doing it, because then you can see like, I really don't have a whole lot of B, or I don't have a lot of C, or oh man, I got a lot of A. Maybe I need to cut that down a little bit. So you can lose points again if you don't put in the margins or as headings what paragraphs the different sections belong to. Hopefully it's to get you to think more about the structure and make sure you're doing all the parts. In addition to your 2 rough drafts, also answer these 4 questions. What 2 storylines did you choose and why? Make sure to include links to stories that inspired you. Also, if you're like fact checking something or if you're referencing a news story, include those. What is the central argument you're trying to make in each? Remember, there's a different, it's different from the topic, is the argument, right? The topic can be, we need to, right? The topic is voting, right? That is a topic. But the argument is that we need more accessible voting, especially for people with disabilities, right? That's an argument within a larger topic. You can make a whole bunch of different arguments surrounding voting, some even kind of at odds with each other, but think about what they are. Again, because I think this is mostly for you, because right, if you don't know what your central argument is, the chances are your reader doesn't know what your central argument is either, right? Don't make them decide for themselves. How does your personal life experience give you unique perspectives on this, right? If I'm the editor and I have 2 op-eds and they're written pretty well the same, they're both about topics that I'm interested in. If one has personal life experience and speaks more passionately about a topic, I'm much more likely to run that in my paper than somebody who's giving kind of an academic or detached objective critique. And think again, I asked you last time to look at some anthropological concepts. What did you use to link these storylines to bigger social issues? How can we make the public a little bit more interested, maybe in anthropology, or bring some of these ideas to light, which we talk about in class? The third thing is, this was originally due last week, but because of our guest, our meet and greet with our guest author, which I thought went really well. Did you guys who went there enjoy it? Little Badger, I thought she was really cool. And hopefully she comes back in the fall, or at least as a virtual meeting with Native American Affairs. And if she does, I'll be sure to post links to that. So because of that, and we had 1 more content analysis, we were slightly behind. So you could do this, and some people did. But for those of you who didn't, you can take the quiz this week as well. It's our last quiz this semester. That's pretty exciting. The last quiz, last homework, and I believe last discussion board as well. So it's getting down to it. Get those points. For your quiz this week on op-eds, what are these 3 important techniques for crafting an effective and successful op-ed? 3 pitfalls to avoid. Talked about that last week. We'll talk about it again today. Talk about it again on Wednesday. How are letters to the editor different from op-eds? We talked about this. I also posted a video in the module. If you forgot, we may go back and look at it if we have time. This one right here, writing an op-ed animation. It'll tell you about the differences between letter to the editor and an op-ed. We might get to it again, but if not, you can always check that out. We talked about it last week, but if you weren't here for that, check it out. How are these different from editorials? How are they different from news? How can the op-ed both be opinionated but also factual, right? We don't want to have just facts and we don't have just opinions. It exists in this nice little part of the Venn diagram right between the middle. Finally, what kind of topics are appropriate for an op-ed? Who is the intended audience? Why is it important to focus on timely issues? So all issues, things we've talked about so far, and we'll continue to talk about it. But if you haven't thought of those yet, that is probably something to be working on this week. Also, last thing before we jump into the topic today, we're coming up real quick on the end of the semester, like I said. We're down here in week 14. If you notice, Monday of week 16, so 2 weeks from today on the 28th of April is going to be the last day to turn in any late work. So if you have stuff that's still out there and you want to get some points, please turn it in. So we got a couple things coming up. You know, we got the quiz, homework, discussion board this week. Next, we got workshop and paper 4 due. Then we got 1 more discussion board, number 8, and test number 1. Then we'll be all done for the class. So very quickly, all done. Finish strong. Okay. So today we're going to talk about structure of writing an op-ed. Where are we? We did this, and letters to the editor we already talked about. Okay, so we'll talk about structure for most of the class. Like a lot of things in, like I think all these parts of writing science we've done this semester are really like structure. I think it's important. Why is structure important? You tell me instead of me telling you. Why is structure in your writing important? Yeah, it keeps things organized. It helps you as a writer make sure that things are flowing logically from one thing to another, right? These are built on decades, centuries, if not more, of writing practice. People have been writing letters to the editor and op-eds and book reviews for a very long time. So kind of thinking about the structure of this is not, it's best to not like reinvent the wheel. We're going to be doing something similar for writing our op-ed. I'll give you a formula and you can, it's fine to like do your own thing. And oftentimes great writers will take a formula and smash it and turn it on its head and do all kinds of fun, weird stuff with it. But why don't you want to do that for your very first one?
You understand what's needed to be put into it.
Yeah, right. Like you need to understand. Yeah, you need to understand how to paint a portrait before you can go be Picasso, right? Like Picasso has, you think of him as like surrealist or whatever, right? But like, so it's, could paint portraits, could paint very lifelike stuff, but it's only by understanding how the structure works that you can start to deconstruct it, right? From an educated perspective, instead of just kind of like, again, reinventing the wheel or throwing something at the wall. So we're going to be using the ABCDEF structure. I like it because, that's as basic as it comes. ABCs. As someone who has a 3-year-old, ABCs, I think are underrated pedagogical device. So we're going to do A, B, C, D, E, F. And each part of this in order is going to be associated with a different letter. A being attention-grabbing lead. It's like your headline, your news flash. It gets the reader hooked. Did you know 5 out of 10 Americans can't afford healthcare in this country, right? That's a kind of a headline grabbing kind of lead, right? Did you know that our roads in Portales are ranked worst in the entire state? I don't know if it's true, but it feels true, right? Should have some data to back that up. But that's going to get your reader interested and involved. A billboard paragraph should come next, the B, which when you state your argument clearly, you move on beyond the headline grabbing facts and you actually lay out what the argument you're making for is. The C is your context paragraph. You're going to provide background or trends, give your audience some readers. Hopefully at this point, you've hooked them well enough to like sit with you through some facts or some data. Make it so they actually feel educated instead of just kind of taking your opinion. Demonstrate is D, specific evidence or examples. You want to ground it in actual fact versus like rhetoric. Like, I think, I don't know, that we live really inefficient and we should go live in a much better and more environmental friendly way. Well, that's like a cool idea, but like how, right? Like by switching to electric cars over gas cars, we can save this much carbon every year, or by lowering your thermostat just 2 degrees in the summer or the winter, you can use this much more energy or something, right? E is equivocate, and I think this is often the most overlooked, but often the most powerful of the paragraphs. It's where you acknowledge the counter arguments. Not everyone thinks that switching to electric cars is a good thing, and they make lots of arguments why, like X, Y, and Z. But I've acknowledged this. I thought about these arguments, but I'm still on the side of whatever, right? And I'm going to counter this opposing view. It's much stronger than just trying to like ignore it and being like, those people are idiots, don't listen to them, right? It's good to like show the counter argument. That means that you're aware, but then it puts you in a strong position because you're the one setting up the counter argument. It's much easier for you to refute it. And then finally, the F. You want to end your op-ed with a strong forward-looking conclusion, usually with a call to action, right? And I argue that we need more restaurants in Portales, so everybody go out and start a business, bring restaurants to town or something like that, right? So we're going to look at all these a little bit more specifically, but that's the general overview, A, B, C, D, E, and F. And I'll be looking for all those parts, as well as your the Writing Center and your peer reviewers when we take a look at your op-eds next week. And it's great because this can be for any kind of topic, right? This is a structure. It can be, I'm writing about, something like local businesses, or I could be writing about like, the state budget or education or something like this, right? It doesn't matter. It can all fit within this formula. And if it doesn't, there might be a bigger issue, right? Like if you like, I don't really have a strong conclusion, or I don't really have any data to back it up, that either means you need to start thinking about it, looking for it, or maybe that's not the best topic. Okay, so what do we got? Let's look more specifically. And again, when you do your homework this week, you're going to actually have your op-ed, and in the margins or in the headings be like, this is my attention getting lead, right? So this is the first one is your hook. It's a news flash, often a brief anecdote. These should be tied to recent events. This is like what I said, you need to be kind of current eventy. This is where you're going to get that, right? Like there's been a wave of arsons in Clovis recently, and I think that, this is indicative of the moral failing of our community, right? That's like a big kind of it's a statement, right? And it hooks your readers in. They want to know a little bit more. It's tied to a recent event. You want to be memorable, you want to be direct, and you also want to avoid something generic. So you want to be specific, right? Like you don't want to be like crime's a big problem. Well, like, yeah, that could run in an op-ed in any newspaper across the country, but tie it into something specific. Again, don't be like politicians are corrupt. I'm probably not going to read that. Like, I know politicians are corrupt, right? Like, just tell me something specific. Like, 3 of the councilmen on the Dora City Council were arrested for embezzlement last year, and this shows the rotten core of our city. Sorry if you live in Dora, it's not true. But that's the kind of thing that gets readers interested. Oh wow, I'm going to read about this, right? Number 2, the billboard. This is the second paragraph or the second chunk of your op-ed. These are real short. So these oftentimes are real short paragraphs. And most of your paragraphs should be pretty small, like 4 sentences more or less per paragraph. This has to do with kind of readability. Especially as people are reading on like mobile devices these days. You don't want like super long paragraphs, it's kind of off-putting to people. And it also keeps your ideas more at the forefront of the readers, right? And it kind of signals where you are. And so as you break these things up, it often is nicer for the audience to read. So in your second paragraph or your second section, it's going to often be like the second part of paragraph 1, if not paragraph 2. This is where you make your core argument. You want to make a quick overview of your stance. You want to lay out key details, and you want to kind of give your readers a sense of where you're going with this. Number 3, context. This is really, I think, this and equivocate really are some of the, these middle sections, right? They're not as like flashy as the first part where you're like making a big claim, or the end where hopefully you're pushing your reader to call to action. But I think this middle part of an op-ed is really what separates like a good op-ed from a mediocre one, right? And often this is in terms of specificity, right? You want to provide your reader with context. Not everyone should write an op-ed about every topic. Everyone should write an op-ed. I think it's a wonderful idea, and it helps, like get citizen voices into the dialogue and change public narratives. But not everyone should write about every topic. Why? Why shouldn't I randomly assign you a topic? Yeah, involved, interested, a knowledgeable expert. That's actually who newspapers want to write op-eds. They want a knowledgeable expert on the topic. You don't have to have a PhD to be a knowledgeable expert. It could be because it affects your life personally. Could be because you work in the field. It could be because you ride your bike to school every day and the roads are terrible. You're a firsthand expert on just how bad it is and how much we need bike lanes, right? So this is gonna, if you can provide that kind of expert knowledge, whether that's personal experience or whether that is actual facts, right? You can talk about history, you can talk about data, you can talk about statistics. Any of that kind of stuff is going to give your reader some context that they need. This often goes into number 4, right? The demonstrate. You want to support your argument with clear evidence, right? You want to avoid being vague. You want to be really specific. And I like this one a lot too. The equivocate section. Oftentimes we say you should have like 2 good counter arguments for your whatever you're arguing for, right? So if I am arguing that, I don't know, that we should have more bike lanes in Portales to make it safer for bikes to drive on the road. A counter argument could be, but what money, right? We don't have money to like fix the roads as is, so how can we spend money on them? Or this is going to cause more accidents because people instead of being on the sidewalk, are going to be on the roads or right next to cars, and it's going to cause more trouble instead of less, right? And so you want to like present these arguments. You don't want to like straw man it up. You don't want to be like, an idiot thinks that bike lanes cause more accidents, right? You don't want to like, or you don't want to be like, present really weak. Well, bike lanes are said to cause cancer, according to some people, but that's not true, right? Like that's not a very good it's not a good faith equivocation. What you want to do is like actually think about this, and maybe we'll do a little activity. I think we'll have time for it today, in which we present ideas to each other. We'll either do this part today or Wednesday, and then your partner in kind of a discussion helps you come up with some ideas that maybe used to equivocate. And it's not like them attacking you, so don't be like, oh, you attacked my idea about bike lanes or whatever. But it is to help you kind of think about what are some arguments that people can use to counter this, and or how can you counter these arguments that are in the public dialogue? Just because, again, it's not your classmates like attacking your ideas, but it's them thinking about like what are the dialogues in this culture? What are some of the ways that someone else could respond to this, right? Because we often get in our own head and we think, well, of course everybody loves bike lanes, right? Like who couldn't love that, right? But in fact, in society, we are very different from each other, and there are lots of different views on seemingly mundane topics. So then you want to show that you're in control of the narrative, and you want to refute these things with facts, right? You want to show that logically, right, according people might say this, there's lots of opinions out there, but according to the facts of the case, this is the best possible outcome or best possible solution. It builds your credibility as an author because it shows that you're thinking critically about this issue and not just kind of being dogmatic. And then finally, F. I think this is kind of one of my favorites too. You want to close with an impactful direction, right? An op-ed should get people to like jump out of their chairs and cheer or be angry or something, right? But it should tell them something. It should make them feel. And it should give them a direction to go, right? Like if they are taken with the topic and you've managed to impress them with like your command of the narrative and of the facts, and they want, and you just kind of peter out of it, it's going to be really unsatisfying, right? The kind of quintessential is like, we got problems in this community, and it's, yeah, we can come together or go vote, right? Like take yourself to the polls and make your voice heard, right? People like, yeah, I can do that, right? You want to like leave them with something positive that they can actually do, right? Try to frame it in a positive way versus like a negative way. Like, don't do this, but yes, go do this, make some change. Often it's good. It works really well if you can kind of tie it back to your opening story or your opening quote, and then offer a vision for the future. People want hope. Okay, so what we're going to do, and again, you can find the A, B, C, D, E, F format in more detail last week in the Canvas module. Go up to, I think it's that one, writing an op-ed. So if you, no, that's PowerPoint. Oh man. Maybe it's the rubric. Yeah, here it is. You can also find, this is from an article on the learningagency.com. This is an article on how to write an op-ed with the ABCDE formula. Also has some videos if you want to check those out. So check those out if you want to review, and you can also go through your rubric and it will tell you the 6 different parts of that. So hopefully that makes sense, and you can begin to work on that. We have 15, 20 minutes left in class. And so again, today we are real close to having to write these things. They're going to be due on Friday. So how do you feel about your topics? Do you feel pretty good? How many people do we have? 2, 4, 5. So let's pair off, or I guess one group is going to be 3 and one group is going to be 2. And we're going to pitch topics to each other, right? Be like, this is what I'm thinking. Give me some feedback on this idea. Do you think this is going to work? And then once you do that, and you kind of, and this can work if you have like a couple ideas already kind of narrowed, or if you're kind of still thinking about it, right? This should be oftentimes we call it an elevator pitch, just a few seconds, right? Like 30 seconds or less. We call it an elevator pitch because it's like if you're stuck in an elevator with someone, you really had to tell them something important, like if you're pitching a movie script to them. It'd be like, hey, my idea is to write about we need infrastructure in this community, and I'm proposing that we put a train from here to Clovis that runs 3 times a day, and it will improve the economic life of the community, right? Then you could be like, that's something I'd be interested in reading, or no, like that's not interesting at all. And then once you kind of get some ideas, this can again work if you have some ideas already, or if you're just kind of spitballing. We do have a request if somebody is like not like I have no idea what to do with one of my two. Dr. Asher has said that they've recently just lost some of their funding from the Save America's Treasures grant, and so if anyone's interested in that, especially if you've ever work with the cyber museum or have some connection to the research there, that is something that they'd be interested in having. And if you want to talk to him more about some of the facts and details, he would have that. And then kind of once you figure out some ideas, again, you're not stuck with it at this point, but it's getting pretty close. So you're going to start to nail those down. And then we're going to start to work on the equivocation part, right? So I want to train between here and Clovis. And you could be like, who will pay for it, right? Like, where's the money going to come? Cool idea, bro. And I could be like, it should be a 2% tax on lodging or something. You'd be like, nobody comes here for lodging tax or whatever, right? Like, or you could be like, well, what happens when I get to Clovis and I get off at the train station and there's no public transportation there? So, like, what are you actually going to do, right? Like, so don't be mean about it and don't be like your idea's stupid, right? But you want to give them some kind of something to work off of that they can like base their equivocation on, right? Okay, are there any questions we can split up 2 and 3 or 2 and 2, and I can work with somebody if you want. We'll do this for about 10 minutes, and then we're going to get back together as a class for the last 5-10 minutes, and we will talk about what we discussed. So let's take a moment. We're out of time for today. We went over the structure of your op-ed, and we also worked together in groups. I feel like everybody here at least has a pretty good start on at least one, if not both, of their topics. And we've also started doing a little bit of the counter arguments. On Wednesday, we'll be meeting over at the GSSC. We can meet kind of by the Einsteins, if you know where that is. I'm sure some of you do. And then we'll meet over there, and we'll be taking a look at some op-eds in the newspaper, which they have over by Einstein. Did you guys know that the newspaper is actually there in the library? Free every week. Right? You can go take a look at it. And we'll be looking at it, and we'll be doing a little structural analysis of the newspaper. So thanks so much for hanging out, and I'll see you next time. Bye.